I want you to think of that one thing you want to do, that one thing you're compelled to do, that you need to do, but you're being held back. What is stopping you? Fear. Fear can be so debilitating. How do we fight through our fear? How do we find courage? It's easy to be courageous when we know what's on the other side, but when we keep moving forward, even though we don't know the outcome, that's courage. 3 years ago, it was a cool and crisp day, the only kind of day you can find in an Alberta autumn. Sat down at a dinner table. It was Thanksgiving with my family, my parents, my sibling, my wife, my child, enjoying this amazing turkey dinner. Nobody can cook a turkey like my mom. You can just smell it right now. We got up to leave. The men were talking sports. The women were cleaning dishes, as were the gendered norms in our family at the time. I never knew where I fit in that scenario. Later, we would gather back together at that dinner table around dessert, except my son wasn't there. He was in another room with headphones on, watching videos because I didn't want him to hear what was about to happen next. I pulled out a tear-stained 3-page letter with words that I had written and rewritten many times over the previous many months. I'm about to tell my mom and dad what was about to happen in my life, that I am transgender, that the son that they thought they had was the other daughter in their life. It was scary, and it took everything I could to find my courage. My boys helped me through that. You see, my boys, we loved them long before they were ever conceived. My wife and I, we struggled for many years to have children. We went through every fertility treatment you could possibly imagine, many pregnancy losses. Finally, in vitro fertilization gave us the gift of twin boys, Alex and Andrew. And we named them Alex and Andrew because they were born so early, we never got through the A's of the name book. They were born 3.5 months early, less than 2 pounds, and very, very sick. This is my favorite picture in the whole wide world, and that surprises a lot of people because it's pre-transition, but I love this picture. It was the first time after 3 months that I got to hold both my boys together at the same time. They'd been too sick up to that point. I loved this picture, this day. A few days later, we got a call from the hospital that said, "There's been a change with Andrew. You need to come in." So we rushed to the hospital, running into the room, and I remember my wife saying, "Give me my boy." As we sat in the chairs, they handed him to her, and we held him, and we looked down at him. You know, my son, he could tell me so many things with his big, beautiful brown eyes. He would say, "I got this, Daddy. I'm going to be okay, Mommy." This particular day, his eyes were tired. And we spent those next few minutes telling him all the things that we needed to say, all the things that we wanted to say. There's never enough time to say all those things. I looked behind me at the respiratory therapist who was standing behind me, tears running down her face. She's gently squeezing a bag that was pushing puffs of air into my son's tiny lungs, keeping him alive long enough for him to know how much we loved him. This is my favorite picture because it would be the only time I would hold both my boys together at the same time. When your son is looking at you for the last time, when you're holding your child as he's taking his last few breaths, it teaches you something about living life without regret, about embracing each special moment and every gift that life brings you. I knew that if I could survive this, I could survive anything, including being true to me. I started dressing in girls' clothes when I was about 5 or 6 years of age. That was about 40 years ago. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Wow, Marni looks pretty awesome. In those days, we didn't have internet. We didn't have, we had 2.5 channels on TV unless the rabbit ears were pointed in the right direction. If you don't know what rabbit ears are, we are totally in a generation gap right now. I never had the language to articulate how I felt. I never heard the word transgender until my 30s. I couldn't tell you who I was, but I could tell you who I wasn't. I didn't fit into what was expected of me as that young boy and then later a man. And our gendered roles were so clearly defined in those days that if I knew that if I was to deviate from those roles, that it would be catastrophic for me. So you get really good at keeping a secret as a child, and you get really, really good at being alone, because that's where your secret is safest. And if I had one word in my entire life that was the common thread through all of the days of my life, it would be the word loneliness. And standing on this stage in front of 1,000 people, I couldn't feel more alone, even in this moment. About a year before that final Thanksgiving dinner with my family, I found myself in Raleigh, North Carolina, as far away from home as I could possibly get, where I could be me for a day, where nobody would know me, where I could hide and just embrace who I was. Now, I've seen 1,000 pictures of myself over the years, but when I saw this picture of me that day, coming out of the Atlantic Ocean with the waves crashing behind me, I saw somebody I had never seen before. I saw me. And it wasn't like it was somebody new. It was somebody who had always been there, but I was too afraid to look. And I finally found that courage to say the words to myself that I am transgender. And it was still very scary, but I knew I had to move forward. Because when you find yourself on this journey of authenticity, you have to follow the road wherever it takes you. You follow the journey wherever it's leading you. Because you get to a point where what you fear losing if you tell your truth pales in comparison to what you will lose if you don't. It's like being on this train. You're going to a town that you've never been to before. You kind of have a vague idea of what it's like, but you don't know what it looks like. You don't know what time you will arrive. Will they be nice to you? Will you be safe? Will you feel welcome? You don't know, but you're compelled to keep going forward. The train isn't going to stop. It's not going to turn around. You keep going forward. You keep looking forward. But to get to that point, you have to look back in your life and reflect on all those times where you fought fear and got to the other side. Wherever you faced adversity, you learn from those moments, because when you don't learn from those are missed opportunities. For me, I can't imagine a more devastating time than losing my own son. But I'm here. It took a lot of work. I never thought there was another side, but I am here. And don't get me wrong, I would give anything to hold him one more time. But I am here. And the gift that gave me was that I knew that I could do anything. So I think back to that dinner with my family, that last Thanksgiving dinner, looking down at that piece of paper with my tears on it from many months. I had never been more afraid in my life than I was in that moment. But I knew I would get to the other side, even though the outcome was pretty much as bad as I ever thought it would be. But I kept moving forward. And in that moment when I told them this boulder had been lifted off my shoulders, I was no longer being held back by this debilitating force of fear. I was able to move forward. I was no longer living by what other people said I had to live. I'm in control of my life now. I have self-determination. I have clarity. And when you can find that within yourself, to be true to yourself, the world opens up before you. What I used to think was a barrier in my life, being a transgender person, being true to me became opportunity. Endless opportunities of things I never imagined. I've got a beautiful 10-year-old boy who loves his daddy. He really loves her. I've got friends and family who I'm more engaged with, more present with. I've got an amazing career at an organization who accepted me for who I was and celebrated the gifts that I had to bring. And now I have an opportunity to affect the society, our whole entire province with my work. It brings you to places you never thought you would be. Just a month ago, I walked into this room and took a seat at this table. A seat at the table. Facing 12 senators from across Canada, I was there to advocate for rights for transgender Canadians. I would spend the next hour giving testimony to the Standing Committee on Constitutional and Legal Affairs, saying that transgender people are people. We deserve rights. We deserve to be protected. And it was scary, and it was intimidating, but I knew I belonged there. And just this last Monday, Bill C-16 received royal assent. It became law in Canada, and it tells transgender Canadians in the whole world that Canada embraces diversity. And it tells transgender people that you belong here, you are welcome here, you are part of the fabric of this country, and we will protect you. You are welcome here. And those are words many transgender people never, ever hear. But it wasn't just me. It was a collection of voices over many, many, many years who each and everybody found their courage to keep fighting forward and advocating together. When enough people find their courage and join together, you can change the course of a country. I recently found myself single for the first time in 18 years, and a single woman for the first time in my life. And I found myself on this thing called the Tinder. Anybody ever hear of this thing? Yeah. Oh, I know, yeah. It's a little stressful. Dating in general. My first girlfriend, I was using a party line. Yeah, I'm that old. I wasn't swiping left or right. I consider myself a pretty confident person. I have worked really hard to get to a point where I can stand on this big red dot and tell the world my secrets. But get into online dating, and in that moment when you're swiping right and hoping they swipe right too, or when you're waiting for that text for what seems like days and days and days, wondering if she likes you too, it's amazing how all of your insecurities can come crashing back with the weight of 1,000 broken hearts. And it's also amazing what you're willing to compromise to not be alone. And it took a few failed relationships, more like catastrophes, to go back through my life and learn again what was important to me. All of those fears that I faced and how I got to the other side. What I realized that the worst thing that I feared wasn't losing my son, wasn't losing my family, wasn't a broken heart. What I feared losing was my ability to be me. Because if I'm not me, if I can't live true, then I'm not living at all. And when I finally found it within myself to say, I'm worthy of being loved, and when I started to love myself, something really fun happened. Somebody else fell in love with me too. The real me for the first time. Because to be yourself in a world that is trying to make you something else, that is your greatest accomplishment. Because we're always being told, you're too tall or too skinny, too much education, not enough education. We're always living up to what everybody else says we need to be. But when you can truly embrace who you are, find your courage to be who you are, that is an accomplishment worth celebrating. So I want you to think back to that question that I asked you at the beginning, that one thing that you're striving for, that one thing that you need, that you want, that you have to do. And I want you to think back through your life of all those times where you faced adversity, all of those fears, all those things that held you back, but yet you got to the other side. And it may not feel like you got to the other side, but we're all here together. Somehow we got here. So I want us all together to commit to each other, to pledge to each other, to support each other, to go find your courage, to take that next step, take that leap, move forward. Because when you find your courage, you inspire other people to find their courage. And when enough people get together and are courageous together, you can change the world. So find your courage to be healthy, to be true, to be happy, to be you.